Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we bring you news for and about America's military. I'm Eric Phillips. The COVID-19 era is tough on everyone, and especially our military. New numbers show suicide among those who are serving is up as much as 20% compared to the same time last year. In the Army alone, officials say they've seen a 30% jump in suicides among active troops, and they're considering shortening deployments. Military leaders say they believe the pandemic is adding stress to an already strained force, especially since numbers for the first 3 months of 2020 show an overall dip in military suicides across active duty and reserves. It's a pain Kim Ruwako knows firsthand. Her husband, a Marine Corps pilot for 15 years, suddenly killed himself.
My husband was a really great dad and husband and a superior Marine and helicopter pilot, but he battled, depression and post-traumatic stress and unresolved trauma and grief. I asked him directly if he was thinking about suicide, if he was feeling so badly that he was thinking about suicide, and he said, "I would never do that to you and the boys." And then he killed himself a couple hours later.
Experts say it's crucial for our service members, active and reserve, to feel a sense of community and for those around them to be observant of changes in behavior. And here's what's even more startling. The increased military suicide numbers could be an indicator for mental and emotional health, that is, of civilians. That's because in the past, the military suicide numbers closely mirrored those in the general population. We have a panel of guests today to discuss this very serious issue for our military men and women and their families. We have Evan Owens with Reboot Recovery, Rick Wolf with Soul Survivor Outdoor, and Jeremy Stelniker with Mighty Oaks Foundation. Gentlemen, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today.
Good morning.
Evan, let's start with you. This problem is not new, but the increase is certainly alarming. What are you seeing?
I think that all of us, when it comes to this is not just a mental health issue. It's not just an emotional health issue. It's a spiritual health issue as well. And when we look at this overarching thing, anybody who's dealt with any mental health challenges or addiction issues or anything of that nature knows that sometimes routine is very, very important. Sometimes it's routine and sort of patterns of behavior that allow us to be able to cope through difficult times. And obviously, we've had a big disruption in our routine. And without routine, a lot of times, I wrote an op-ed recently that said the greatest threat to America's military is not a virus. It's actually the opportunity or the increased opportunity for self-destruction. And a lot of times, tragically, the decisions that we make take us down rabbit holes where sometimes it can feel like there's no way out. And I think that's really what we're seeing here is people who feel like suicide's a viable option.
Yeah, and I guess the best thing to do is to try to figure out a way to keep them from going down that rabbit hole to begin with. Rick, what about you? Were you surprised by these numbers?
Unfortunately, not surprised by the numbers. Obviously, what we've got is an American problem, and it's not just a military problem, but it's a cut of the cloth relative to what's happening in American society. And as Evan has said, faith plays a huge role in this, I believe, and in terms of resiliency, and even from the standpoint of early intervention, that's really key. Because what's happening with the pilot who committed suicide, the Marine pilot, and the spouse not really even knowing what's happening, that the impacts of deployments, the disintegration or the lack of community and so forth that's occurred with the additional stressors of COVID and so forth, and the inability to have a resiliency that's based on something bigger than yourself. And so I think the faith component is huge, and we see chapel attendance going down. We see people of faith maybe not focusing on that nearly as much. And so I think faith is a huge component of this, and unfortunately not surprised by what's happening with the suicide epidemic at this point.
And to your point, I've done some in-depth reporting on this, and the fact of the matter is faith is what they call a mitigating factor. In other words, those who believe in faith and practice faith, whatever it may be, those who do have a much less chance of death by suicide. So, Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is something that those of us that work in this space have been talking about for a long time. Back in April, I think it was ABC News put out an article with a study that said calls to the U.S. mental health helpline have gone up almost 1,000%. Now, that's not just representative of the military, but Americans who are dealing with this COVID crisis and the isolation and the quarantine and so forth. And that really does reflect what we're seeing in the military. When you start to isolate folks who are struggling in their lives anyhow, and you take away the ability for them to have community, for them to have the connection, for them to offload what they're dealing with, and again, in many cases, removing them not just from chapels, but from faith communities, local churches, and the other organizations that have helped them through these times and helped their families. You remove all of that from them, and then add on top of that longer deployments, quarantines on either side of deployment, separation from family, and you have created a situation that is really what was reported on this week. This is something we've been talking about anecdotally, and now we have some data to back up what we've believed is true.
And that dovetails perfectly into my next question. Some say this is happening because, as we've reported, COVID is just another stressor, just something else to add to an already strained situation in the military. Is that something you agree with, Rick?
Absolutely. And as Jeremy's talked about, I think some of these factors create a perfect storm, so to speak. And isolation is an absolute killer. As a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps and caring for a pretty significant number of men, in this case, a number of years ago, that had returned from combat. And what would happen oftentimes is somebody would go in their room and turn out the lights and self-isolate. And, that is a sure ingredient for somebody ultimately taking their life. And so this whole, whether it's community at churches, local churches, or on base, or the inability for service members even to commune together in their workspaces, and just the huge impact, it's a perfect storm for what's going on right now.
Absolutely, and that's why military chaplains are more important than ever, many of them taking to virtual means in order to get their ministry and get their message across, and they're so needed. As a matter of fact, I spoke to the head chaplain in the military who told me that, their chaplains are getting more requests for their time, more requests for their ministry than ever before. Jeremy?
Yeah, absolutely. These ministries from chaplains, or the ministering from the chaplains, is absolutely essential. It's incredibly vital. But beyond the chaplain and beyond their ministry, we have to see the connections taking place in places, in communities where real talk can happen. One of the factors to mitigate suicide is identifying the signs, having conversations before those decisions are made. And when you separate someone who's struggling with those thoughts of suicide, Evan talked about this when we started, it begins to compound in their mind. It becomes a real viable option because they don't have a stopgap or a firewall. They don't have anyone to say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. There is another option. We're told that most decisions to take one's life happen within just a few minutes of the act taking place. And being separated, being isolated, being alone creates, again, that perfect storm where this happens.
And that's why that sense of community is so important, right, Evan?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. I think that something else that we can't overlook is the role that the local church and these communities' faith leaders play. I mean, for years now, more than a decade, we've been sort of rinse and repeating the same solutions: more medications, more therapies. And we're seeing that those two things alone aren't solving the problem. So more funding going to the same solutions is not working. And that's because I believe that the backbone of healing from these types of things and overcoming these types of traumas and difficulties is loving, trusting relationships. It's something that our faith community has in spades. It's something unique that they can offer, is that loving, trusting community, a safe place for people to be able to process what they've been through and also understand how they feel about themselves, how they feel about other people, and how they can connect and feel about God. And I believe that's a superpower. So if faith leaders are watching, get involved. Get involved.
Yeah. It strikes me that this is not a one-dimensional problem, but certainly faith is a large part of the solution. Gentlemen, if you will stick around with us, we will certainly continue this conversation in just a moment. Stay with us. Coming up, more from our panel on what's being done to help military men and women and their families as they struggle with these issues. Stay with us. You're watching On the Home Front.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back to On the Home Front. Our panelists, Evan Owens with Reboot Recovery, Rick Wolf with Soul Survivor Outdoor, and Jeremy Stelniker with Mighty Oaks Foundation. Now, gentlemen, we talked before about the problem. Let's talk solutions now. What do you think or know the military is doing to help our armed forces and their families? And Jeremy, we'll start with you.
Sure. As you mentioned, as we began this conversation, the first 3 months of this year, we actually have seen or did see suicide rates amongst the active duty component of the military going down. And so some of the mitigating programs and factors and conversations that the military's put in place have been helping. And we look at things like the president signing an executive order to initiate what he calls the Prevent Task Force to deal specifically with suicide amongst the military. Chaplains who are being trained better on how to deal with these things. Community leaders within the military communities understanding that this is a real problem and engaging it directly. Unit commanders, this is something we've experienced more and more. Unit commanders reaching out to organizations like ours and like Reboot and like Soul Survivor and asking for help. They understand there is a problem. It's not a problem that can just be pushed aside. And they're calling in folks who understand the faith component of this to really help them work through that. And so some great things have happened, have been put in place. But again, this COVID curveball that's hit all of us is something new. And we're working through that, but some real people with real solutions are engaging.
And what a curveball it was. Rick, are you seeing some positive action taking place for our soldiers?
Absolutely. Evan mentioned basically what's been kind of a one-dimensional approach to this for a long time. In 2016, the suicide rates among veterans and active duty was about 16 per day, which is obviously quite terrible. Since then, about 1,200 programs have been developed by the VA and the Department of Defense that have been primarily clinical. And the suicide rates, as you've seen, have climbed up to 22 a day at a minimum. But I think what's happening now is DOD is really taking the gloves off. The service chiefs have said, spiritual fitness is one phrase that's been coined, and the services are really taking a hard and active look at this as a foundation for living. In terms of what we're doing, we're seeing commanders at all levels. In fact, we just completed 3 events with soldiers from Fort Hood that were outdoor events that got the soldiers out of their element, that had a faith discussion, that had a very actively engaged chaplain. And so what we're really seeing is a multi-pronged attack on this, both from the presidential level, regardless of political affiliation, what's going on with prevents, and each one of the service chiefs basically saying, hey, you know what, we need to take all approaches and put them on the table. And so now faith, which probably ought to be center stage to begin with, is really playing a major role. That's what we're seeing.
So we have less than 2 minutes now, and I want to hear about what each of you is doing and your ministries. Evan, let's start with you. What is your ministry doing? Tell us just a little bit about it quickly, if you can, please.
Absolutely. We help veterans, first responders, and their families overcome trauma related to what they experience in their careers. We do it on a local level through peer-led courses across the country. We've got nearly 300 courses meeting in churches and basements and houses and clubhouses and you name it. So if people wanted to start a course, they can go to rebootrecovery.com. They can start a course right in their community and start making a difference. They don't have to do anything big. They can do something in their church, in their hometown, and that's what we help them do.
All right, Rick, you can talk about yours a little bit?
You bet. So Soul Survivor Outdoor is really focused strictly on the active duty community. And so trying to build resilience into the force. And we use the outdoor adventure component to really break down the barriers and create discussion. And we partner with great organizations like Mighty Oaks, who will bring speakers out and tell their true life stories. And so it becomes, in some ways, from a Christian standpoint, people might see it as a very informal church service, so to speak, but we're not a church, but we're engaged with the active duty community and having this faith discussion as a component to build a solid life foundation so that we can, have early intervention, basically. And so you can find out more about Soul Survivor Outdoor at soulsurvivoroutdoor.org.
And Jeremy, what is the thrust of the Mighty Oaks Foundation?
Sure. Similar to Soul Survivor and Reboot, we work with veterans, active duty service members, and first responders dealing with trauma related to their service. We bring them to one of our facilities, spend a week with them, and break that down, really approaching it from a faith creation position. We pay for travel, we pay for the program so that there are no barriers to getting the help that they need, and then partner with other organizations to help them move forward.
Gentlemen, thank all of you so much for your time. Certainly, this is a big problem, but you all are part of the solution. So thank you very much, and God bless all of you. And we'll be right back.
Thank you.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to cbnnewschannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. The problem of suicides in the military is not a new one. Former Ranger and CBN News contributing reporter Chuck Holton has a video podcast called The Hot Zone. He talks in one episode about why they often struggle with thoughts of taking their lives.
If U.S. military veterans were a country, they'd have the highest suicide rate in the world, more than a third higher than the current #1 country, Lithuania. We've seen over 6,000 veteran suicides every year since 2005, and that constitutes a national crisis. I think there are many complex factors that lead to the problem we're seeing today, and there are a lot of people out there who have spent a lot more time looking at the issues surrounding post-traumatic stress and all that than I have. But to the military's credit, they're taking the problem very seriously. I want to show you some testimonies the Army's filmed that it's using in its anti-suicide push.
I have my own story, and I've never shared it with anyone, but hearing a very personal story from someone today actually made me change what I was going to talk about completely and to share my story, because it really pulled at my heartstrings, and I don't see why I shouldn't share my story to possibly pull at someone else's heartstrings. 10 years ago, we were going through a lot, my family and I. We'd lost everything, basically. Lost our restaurant, lost our home. We lost, or almost lost our home. And I felt like a burden to everyone. I just lost my girlfriend at the time. Of course, when you're in high school, that's a big deal. I had contemplated taking my life. I'd even wrote the note and was about to do it. And luckily, the minister caught me. I remember what it was like to be helpless. I remember what it was like to feel alone and beside yourself. Because during my struggle, there was people there for me everywhere. And I was so consumed in my own self and everything that was going on in my struggle. And I let that struggle overcome me. I let it have that power over me. Something that's not even human, and something that's not even, it's a feeling. I let a feeling totally take hold of my body. I did, check into a behavioral health, and I got help then, which was really hard for me. I needed that help. I needed to be there. I needed to see someone, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think as I got older, or as I get older, and as I've learned, it doesn't make me a weak person as I thought then for seeking help. But I think the most valuable thing that I may have learned while I was there was that I wasn't alone. I wasn't secluded like I thought. My mind was playing a trick on me. My thoughts were playing a trick on me. And I was never alone to begin with. I've heard jokes be made about mental health issues and about suicide and seeking help, and jokes about those hospitals, and it's not good. It's real demoralizing, more than anything, to have someone joke about it. I've had individuals confide in me with similar issues and struggles, and because of my experience, I knew kind of what to say a little bit. I knew kind of what to do. I'm lucky for what I went through 10 years ago, because it helped me be a better person, and it gave me that personal growth that I need. I'm about to have a fiance. We're gonna get married probably within the next year or two. I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for me seeking help. Vent to someone. Don't bottle it up. Always be there for someone. We're all in this together. That's my biggest thing is, we're all in this together. We all need to encourage each other to reach out and to seek help more.
So this is great, and I think they should do more of it. Sharing our troubles helps other people who are going through the same thing. But I really think addressing the root causes of the problem will require more than this. In the case of our veterans, you have to understand the very unique stressors that hit a guy kind of by surprise when he returns from downrange. His battle in the kinetic sense might just be over, but another one is beginning when he gets home. See, the most difficult thing for a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine to handle when they come back off deployment is the fact that everyday life is just so complicated. Here's what I mean. Combat simplifies your life a lot. When you're in battle, you're not worrying about your bills or insurance, your mortgage, and your relationships are kind of on hold. And you're very, very necessary. And I mean, a unit in a fight needs all the help it can get. Every troop is supremely valuable. It's built into the military ethos that they leave no man behind. So your problems are in the now, not in the future. And there's some group of guys over there that wants to kill you and your buddies, and all it takes to solve your problem is right in your hands. 11 pounds of pressure with your trigger finger can fix just about all the problems you've got. You own everything. If you need to use somebody's house, for example, you just take it. So your life is very simple. Well, then you come home. Your car insurance got canceled, your wife's gotten used to running things without you, and everybody at the mall is using this very precious, costly liberty you've been fighting for and watching your friends die for to surf social media on their phones. So you feel kind of angry and useless, disconnected, unnecessary. And that's a toxic mix that leads many of these guys to put a gun in their mouth. For too long, the military has, I think, tried to band-aid that problem and actually is like prohibited chaplains, for example, from using strategies that will mitigate the problems that have been proven to increase meaning in a person's life.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
That's it for this edition of On the Home Front. You can always find more CBN News on our CBN News channel or online with cbnnews.com. Plus, you can connect with us on social media. We hope you'll join us next time. If you're in the military or have been, thank you for your service. Have a great day.